Hey, welcome to the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast with me, Rob Kosberg. Every week, I interview thought leaders and experts who have used a book to grow their income and their impact. So tune in weekly for these interviews so you can learn how to use your own best-selling book and go from hunting for clients and opportunities to instead being the hunted. All right. Hey, welcome everybody. It's Rob Kosberg here. Got another episode of the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast. Excited to have a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, Krister Ungerbök. He's the former CEO of a global tech company and a leadership language expert. His Wall Street Journal book, 22 Talk Shifts, Tools to Transform Leadership, we'll talk a little bit about today. His insights have appeared in numerous national and international publications, including NPR, Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur, and now, finally, the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast. So, Krister, great to have you with us today to talk a little bit about your book and, interestingly, how you're using your book. So, welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I don't know, the only thing that I'm more passionate about than writing books and helping people change their lives is maybe marketing the books to help people change their minds, change their lives.
Yeah. You know, that is certainly a big sticking point for people. And I know you're doing a lot of things. You've obviously done some things really successful. Your book's number one Wall Street Journal. That's, we have a lot of Wall Street Journal. My book is a Wall Street Journal. It's not number one, though. So I know what it takes just to get on the list. And it's a good deal of work. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, well, we were actually that week, Oprah had a new book and we were just, so I'm still in CEO kind of groups from back when I was CEO of a software company. And I've stayed in that group because I'm close to them. And like 3 years ago, we sat down and we did one of those visioning, summarize your vision for the next 10 years in a kind of a tagline, if you will. And after doing 2 or 3 days of exercises and thinking about it, I was already in the author world. And I said, my tagline is to be Oprah ready. And the intention for me was really is my message to a point that not that I would ever get on Oprah's show. That's am I physically in shape that I wouldn't be embarrassed that I'm like, oh my God, that's my one moment of fame. And there I am overweight on stage. But it was the thing that was really powerful for me was this amazing coincidence that we said, hey, let's do a promotion to try to get on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, that we actually hit number one. And Oprah's book was number 2 on the ebook list.
That's a screenshot right there.
It was kind of wow, maybe I could be on Oprah someday. And now I need to really get in shape because I haven't made much progress on the physical fitness, which was the primary reason for this goal.
Right.
So, anyway.
Love it. Love it. Well, talk to me about 22 Talk Shifts. What was the genesis of writing that book? Was it transitioning out of your corporate job and transitioning into something else? Talk to me about the genesis and also kind of the magic behind the book.
So for me, we rewrote this book 5 times.
Wow.
I had quite a few editors and people who helped me kind of through the process. And ultimately the challenge that I was trying to crack, which was ultimately the problem that happened to me in my life, was I had read all these books on leadership and communication and business, like many successful business leaders do. We had an amazing success, in the business. I mean, the company was sold last year for hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm still an owner in that. But ultimately, my personal life just basically fell apart. And my relationships in business, while we had great results, I didn't have really strong relationships with those people in business. And I was just what was I missing all this time? And what I really wanted to do, and what made it so hard, is I wanted to write a book that was equally powerful as a business leadership book, but also a book for people to transform their relationships with their spouses and their children. And
that's good.
And it's kind of a really that was one of the reasons why I wanted to hire and involve myself with people. I was a CEO of a tech company. I'm not a writer. Yeah. Who's to think that I'm going to write a number one Wall Street Journal bestseller on my first swing of the bat, right? And ultimately, it was the 5th swing because we literally rewrote this book 5 separate times, or 4 separate times, 5 separate drafts before it was published over 5 years.
Wow.
It wasn't until I actually really found the right people to kind of help me navigate that process that the book would have never been the success that it was, because if it's not a quality product, right? Yeah. We, like you, do a lot of Facebook ads, but I didn't really go for that or even consider, kind of trying to get onto the Wall Street Journal bestseller list until the book was already out And we are already getting like reviews from strangers on Amazon saying, wow, this, book is changing my life. And like people text, because like, why invest money in marketing a book or any product if it doesn't already have some inbuilt referral capacity? So you got to first have a good product.
Yep.
You have a crappy product and everyone's going to tell others how bad it is, then that's a really not a great thing to advertise on Facebook.
Yeah. You don't want to get a lot of eyes on a crappy product.
Yeah. So it is, I don't know, that for me, I think it is a book that I was finally, the very first version of the book 4 years ago. I worked with a company and it was a large part, I wasn't really clear on what I wanted the book to be, but I was like, the only thing worse than, I was originally thinking, well, I'm going to have some people help me because I'll just have my first book be like, it's like the beta test, right? I'll learn what I can. And my second book will be the book that I'll go big.
Yeah.
Somebody told me at one point, he said, you know what, the last thing that you want is a book that's out in the world that you're embarrassed about, that you want to tell people like, you hold up the book and you're like, oh yeah. No. Just wait till my next book. I don't want you to actually buy this book because I'm afraid I'm embarrassed about it. And that was like, oh yeah, that's a really good point. I could already see that. I was like, I know that's not my best work and I'm not going to be proud to put it in people's hands because of the quality of like just the writing. And so I kind of pulled it back and said, and ultimately it was 4 more years before we actually published a book, which I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Talk to me about who primarily the audience is, and also maybe kind of, walk me through a little of how you're using the book, what that looks like. Like you have an ideal client, the audience, et cetera.
Well, so this is something that we've done, the opposite of what everyone will say to do with a book it is kind of a book for, I don't want to say everyone, but I have people from I have 85-year-old grandmothers who've never worked a day in corporate life in their life calling me in tears about how this book is helping their children in their 40s, and then their grandchildren and things like that. And then I have entrepreneurs like me who are like, oh my gosh, this is transforming my leadership, how I speak to people. And then I have stay-at-home moms that are in their 40s that are using the book as a framework to transform their marriage to, sometimes a man who is a professional oriented person. So we looked our ideal clients as really 2 or 3. It's the woman who's in a troubled marriage, probably to somebody who's a career-oriented person like myself, like I was. Another is the kind of aging parent who wants to recover a relationship with a distant child, or the 40, 50 something child who wants to kind of deepen their relationship with an aging parent before they pass. And then there's another audience, the younger leader entrepreneur who just wants to read the book as a business book to be a better leader and grow their company. So I don't have a really good answer for we don't have an ideal customer.
You went broad with the audience.
Yes, I remember actually when I was losing a lot of money in the 3 or 4 times of things, I said, I took the I'm going to go big or go home approach. And then COVID hit and I was like, well, and I'm home already. So there you go. But we've probably invested about $1 million in this book. And we're just now getting to a point where we're actually turning it into a profitable enterprise to recoup our $1 million.
Nice. Okay. So there are a lot of people that are listening and their eyebrows just really went up when you said you invested $1 million into the book. So obviously, you don't have to tell me every detail, but talk to me a little bit about what that investment looked like, because that's a small amount of money. Well, so one,
let's think about why, right? So I come from the software business and I just looked at if I look purely as an investor, a book is a mailbox money product, right? Yeah. If you can get to a point where you can sell 50 or 100,000 books and this book has enough word of mouth factor that it just becomes a self-sustaining thing. If you look at that as an investor, if you could create a cash flow stream of even $100,000 a year for the next 20 years, would you be willing to spend $1 million to get $100,000 for free?
Of course.
For 20 years. Of course, right? So I looked at it it wasn't just I was like, I want to go, spend a bunch of money and be number 1 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller. It was really looking at it like an investment. So that was that. I'd say the investment broke down probably about $250,000 was really research. Admittedly, it was me basically using myself as a guinea pig. What did I miss? And, basically just hiring high-end coaches, some of these coaches that'll charge you $50,000 for, Sure. So I went and I explored a lot of different avenues to find these tools that we ultimately published. I would say another $250,000 was just in any combination of editing, cover design. There was some parts, initially there was some of the first versions of the book were ghostwritten. So like all of those things kind of all together.
Right.
Once we saw that the book was catching on, we actually did a second edition. So that was like $25,000. We were like, hey, let's resolve some of the problems that we know are in the book. Again, probably about $250,000. And then the marketing net, probably about $500,000 in marketing. And I would say we probably invested about $1 million in marketing, but the $500,000 is what we lost, right? So obviously we had sales.
Yeah. $500,000 come back.
Yeah, we probably spent about a $1.5 million in marketing now I think about it. And then we've gotten basically $1 million back. Basically Facebook was probably the beneficiary of most of that money.
Yep.
But we're now to the point where it's to the point where we're seeing that, we're now like, we're just around the corner from breaking even and turning it into that, $100, $200, maybe even $500,000 a year revenue stream that doesn't require coaching. I don't necessarily have to do any work to get that revenue back. And I do want to be clear, like my vision, I sold my company, like I'm doing this, every dollar of profit actually is going to be donated. So I'm not taking a single dollar of personal compensation for this.
Beautiful.
It's really about our mission is to change the words of the world, that people use in their marriages, with their children, with their parents, but also with their employees at work. And I think that this book has the potential to do it with the right marketing.
I love it. I love it. There's a lot that you said there that I'm sure people are wondering about. I know that I am. The first part that comes to mind is the funnel stuff and the ways that you're recouping it. But I want to hold that until just a few minutes more towards the end. Talk to me about what the 22 talk shifts are. You don't have to go through every single one of them. How do they segment out this idea of you reinvesting so much money and doing it not really to make a profit, but to give back means that this is something very, very significant. So talk to me about what those talk shifts are.
So the talk shifts are the things that I wish I had when I was a leader, running my company. There's 22 chapters, and each chapter has specific fill-in-the-blanks phrases, provocative questions, or exercises that you can use the moment you close that page in the book. I mean, like you get immediate change.
Love that.
And it's just very practical. Like a good example, I was like emotional intelligence is something there's tons of research that leaders who have more emotional intelligence are more successful. And I read Daniel Goleman's book back in the 1990s, and I probably read 3 or 4 other emotional intelligence books. And I thought that I was actually an emotionally intelligent leader. But what I realized is actually I was using words that actually fooled me into think I was talking about emotions, but I actually wasn't, because I would use the word I feel. And they're actually in the book, we talk about some specific things about how we can use the word I feel like, or I feel that. And we're not actually talking about emotions. We're not emotionally intelligent at all, even though we're using the word I feel. And then we give the antidote of here's how you speak differently that will actually force you to speak in a more emotionally intelligent way. Well, none of that was anywhere in all these best-selling books about emotional intelligence.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I want to have tools that break it down to specific language. Yeah. I had the opportunity to open businesses in Europe, in France and Germany, shortly after September 11th. And I had to learn to lead in French and German. And so language was actually a really practical tool for bringing new leadership insights. And there's some of the stories in the book actually get into like subtle nuances between the differences between French and German and other languages and English. It's not a primary element of the book, but there's probably 4 or 5 of the talk shifts that were informed by subtle nuances, differences in actual language, where specifically English speakers, when it comes to emotional intelligence, actually have a little bit of a disadvantage compared to people who speak in other languages.
Really?
Yeah, because we use the word, if you were to look up the word feel in an English thesaurus, the word think is actually a synonym for feel. Well, in most other languages, you don't find that. And so we can talk about our feelings or think we're talking about our feelings, but we're really talking about our thoughts. So I don't know, that's like talk shift number 18. It's kind of towards the end of the book. But as I said, that's one of the things we get most frequently. People comment like, I open the book and like less than 30 minutes after starting it, I already have 2 or 3 tools that I can start practicing immediately in my life.
Love books like that. One of my favorite books is What to Say Next, or it's basically a sales tool book, sold over 1 million copies. It sounds like your book is very similar from the standpoint of, again, leadership, but I guess leadership both in the family as well as leadership in business. How do you get that message out? When I look at it, I think of business. So how do you get the message out that this is something that an 86-year-old grandma, will resonate with?
That was part of the strategy from the beginning is, well, publicly it's positioned. If you go to Amazon or you see me talk at if I do a keynote talk at some conference, it's usually more it's like 80% business with like a little subtle nod to, hey, you can use this in outside of business as well. But the way we do that is we kind of do the end around with Facebook ads. I mean, we go direct. We target people and we have ads that allow us to. The interesting thing I mentioned, we did a second edition. The reason we did that second edition is because we actually had those, some of those 80-year-old grandmothers were actually saying, hey, I bought this book off of a Facebook ad. And then when I got it, it felt like something. It felt like a business book. So it was like they felt like they were being bait and switched.
Right.
And part is because we organized the book that the last third of it is actually the relationship stuff. Let's say the things that apply equally in relationships as well as in professional relationships. And there's like the first chapter is first two chapters are very business oriented. So what we did is we said, well, what we need to do is put a preface on the front. So all those people who are reading it for a personal relationship, we can essentially reframe the context to say, hey, this is a business book. But what I found is the underlying dynamics between a personal relationship and a professional relationship, when relationships fail, is because we don't talk about things. We're afraid. There's this fear-fueled silence.
Yeah.
And ultimately, whether it's talking about my business partner or a key employee, if I'm a boss and if I'm an employee, I'm afraid to tell the boss what's really on my mind because I'm afraid of getting fired.
Right.
Well, and I'm going to use, a traditional family role. If I'm a stay-at-home mom married to a man who's the primary breadwinner and he's making a good income, I may be afraid to talk about what's really on my mind because how am I going to support myself if we're divorced?
Right. Right.
So there's these tools at some level are really, here's conversation tools to help overcome the fear that causes people to stop talking about what bothers them. And if we don't know as leaders in a marriage or in a parenting or a relationship or in a business relationship, we don't know what's bothering people, then how can we change and shift our behavior to make things better?
Yeah. Good. I love it. Well, we'll give them a link in just a few minutes on how people can get it. So very interesting how you connected those things. Talk to me a little bit about how you're using the book. That's one thing that we do a little bit different on this podcast because our listeners are generally business people, but they're authors who are, looking for ways to use the book to make an impact and an income. Talk to me about how you're doing that and getting it into more people's hands that way.
So we kind of did, again, a little bit the opposite of what most people do. Like we started with, okay, let's see if we can make money off the book. Maybe have like a low priced video course at $29, $39,
right.
Some really small products where most people who do this effectively, they say, hey, let me give away the book for, $5, $10, whatever. And I'll try to get people into like a coaching program at $500, $1,000, $10,000. And as you know, if you get 1 out of 10,000 people signing up for a $10,000 coaching program, then it works, right? So we actually went the opposite and we're like, well, let's see if we can kind of get this to be break even with just low-end products, knowing that we can always add high-ticket, $5,000, $10,000 programs later. And so the interesting thing is, this is like as a business person, when you bumping up to like 10,000 feet, when you see people who like transform industries, it's usually people who kind of overturn the assumptions, right? You start with a set of assumptions, or here's a good example, like people who bootstrap companies versus companies that get like $100 million in seed funding, right? If you got $100 million, people tend to make different decisions than people who are bootstrapping and trying to go from one. So by setting this kind of constraint of saying, we have this book that, there's literally 100 million people just in the United States alone who could potentially benefit from this book. Let's see if we can just break even on the book itself.
Right.
Took us down a very different path. And since we're kind of now to the point where we're essentially there, now it's the easy part, which is the high ticket and coaching program.
If you decide to do that.
We will do that. I don't know. Personally, I have like a very specific type of person that I want to coach, which is a very unique niche, a very small niche. But I also have a group of, I guess one of the nice things about all those people that I hired to coach me while building the book, I have actually a good number of people who I trust. And, that I could say, hey, I can work with other third-party coaches as partners.
Right.
So that's kind of probably more likely what we're going to do.
Love it.
Unless we can figure out how to turn a reality TV show, an online virtual coaching thing into a reality TV show, then that'd be something I'm interested in.
Well, the only way something like that works is if it's an absolute train wreck, because that's all people want to watch on TV are train wrecks. I don't know how much fun you'd have doing a train wreck, though.
No, I think that there's I don't know. I think that there's could be inspiring things also work. And, with editing, there's plenty of train wrecks.
I guess that's true. Yeah. Undercover millionaire, now undercover billionaire. That has worked very, very nicely. So that is possible. So love it. Love what you're doing, Krister. Thanks. Thanks so much. Where can people get a copy of the book? What links can we send them to learn more about what you're doing?
The book is at www.talkshift.com.
Okay.
In terms of speaking and things like I do, in any coaching, that's at www.krister.com. So Krister with a K.com. Okay. And then, of course, we donate all of our profits to charity, but if you prefer to give the profits to Jeff Bezos, you can buy it on Amazon.
Love that. All right.
You can help him put a couple extra drops of fuel into his next rocket.
Exactly. I'm sure that going to TalkShift, no S on the end, right? Just TalkShift.com is the place that people should go. Or, of course, Krister.com. Love that. Love what you're doing. Congratulations. Really respect your commitment, both financial, because, where your money is, there your heart is as well. And so, the fact that you've made such a financial commitment means that you really have your heart in this project. So congratulations on that, and look forward to seeing the cool things you do in the future with it.
Great. Thank you.